Today we take a look at kids playing violent video games. Does it lead to real-life violence? Please remember to subscribe for more content like this.
Kids playing violent video games, does it lead to real-life violence? This is a good question, and one that has been asked many times before. A recent study at the University of Texas at Dallas found that violent video games can affect the brain's reward system in a similar way to drugs or alcohol. The study also found that these effects lasted up to an hour after playing. Researchers have been studying the addictive nature of video games since 1996, when they first became available on home consoles, and even earlier. In fact, there are several different scales that can be used to measure how addicted someone is to gaming. One was developed by Dr. Kimberly Young at Stony Brook University, another by Dr. Douglas Gentile at Iowa State University, and another still by Dr. Jamie Madigan, who runs Psychology of Games online blog about psychology in digital spaces. What is the attraction to violence in video games? Sense of power. Teens often feel powerless in the real world, especially if they are not doing well in school or at home. Violent video games give them a sense of power over others, including adults and authority figures, who often appear less powerful than teens in real life. In addition, teens can experience power over their own environment when playing violent video games. For example, they might be able to control where they go in the game and what happens to them, as opposed to being subject to unpredictable circumstances that happen around them in real life, such as getting randomly fired from your job. In addition, playing violent video games may give teens a feeling of power over their own emotions. For example, you can kill someone without feeling remorse or experiencing guilt, at least until later. Finally, some violent video games allow players to assume roles that are normally forbidden or unavailable. For example, one could assume the role of an assassin without having actually killed anyone before, or perhaps even went through military training as part of playing that role. Is playing violent video games a sign of mental illness? It's important to note that playing violent video games doesn't necessarily mean you're mentally ill, or even more likely to commit a violent crime. There's no evidence that anyone who plays violent video games will be affected by them in the same way, and there is certainly no research proving that playing violent video games causes mental illness. However, some studies have shown that playing violent video games can lead to increases in aggressive thoughts and behaviors in some people. This isn't surprising considering how many hours we spend staring at screens. Our brains are being shaped by what we see on them every day. It seems as though researchers are still trying to figure out whether or not this change actually makes any difference for teens' brains, and ultimately their behavior. Long-term, a lot more research needs done before anyone makes definitive conclusions about whether or not violent gaming leads people down dark paths toward violence against themselves or others. Are there benefits to playing violent video games? While violent video games can also be harmful, you may be surprised to learn that some of the same types of benefits seen in studies on violence in the media are also associated with playing violent games. For example, a study published in the journal Psychological Science showed that people who played violent video games were better at reading other people's emotions than those who didn't play any games at all. Another study found that when kids played an action-based game called Super Mario Sunshine, they had improved spatial abilities, the ability to use and manipulate one's environment, compared to kids who spent time watching TV or using computers. And another found that adolescents who played sports had higher levels of self-esteem than those who did not play sports. In addition, researchers have explored whether playing violent video games increases aggressive behavior by measuring brainwaves, heart rate and blood pressure for participants before and after playing them for about 10 minutes each day over a 2-week period. They found no changes in these measures even though participants reported feeling more aggressive after playing them. The attraction to violent video games isn't always something to worry about. You may have a teen who's interested in playing violent video games, but you're not sure if it's cause for concern. Violent video game play is something we've seen increasing over the past few years, and there are a lot of different things that can explain why teens are drawn to these games. Some research has shown that people with mental illnesses like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder tend to favor violent video games as well, but it's unclear whether they were already predisposed to those illnesses before they started playing the games or if their disorder made them more likely to be attracted to violence in their leisure time. The same goes for other issues like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, and autism spectrum disorder, so it may be that kids with these conditions are predisposed toward liking violent media because of their brain chemistry, or lack thereof, or it could just be another symptom of a larger issue.